For decades, the Motor Racing Network has told you the story on the racetrack.
Cale's in the grass. Cale loses it. He tries to pull it back. Downey side by side. They make contact. Both head toward the wall.
But more often than not, that's only half the story. Now, we're pulling back the curtain on all those tall tales both in and out of the garage.
The whole situation between Cale and Donnie was simply, if I can't win it, I'm going to make sure you don't.
Stories the newer fans have never heard, and the older ones just can't get enough of.
When that right cross hit that jaw, it's over.
We're sending you into another MRN TaleSpin.
Trouble at turn 5.
Now, here's your host, Alex Hayden.
And welcome to another edition of TaleSpin. I'm Alex Hayden of MRN. Glad you can join us. And this edition of TaleSpin is going to be something spectacular. Let's go ahead and introduce you to our panel here on the program. To my far right, Jim Chopper Phillips, longtime broadcaster with the Motor Racing Network. But we'll get to more on Jim here in just a moment. Of course, Barney Hall, the legendary voice of NASCAR. Barney is with us. And our guest today on TaleSpin is L.D Ottinger. And L.D., you're here. Chops over there to your right. There's a little history between you two.
Yeah, Chops, he started back in, I don't know what year, but Chop, he worked for me for quite a few years.
1981.
Not that he's counting.
No, but anyhow, Chop did a great job. You know, he was there every day, and he went.
That's not what he used to say, folks.
Yeah, but Chop did a great job for me. You know, he learned a lot about racing. You know, and he liked to learn, and every time we go to the racetrack, it'd be something new, you know. And Chop would always remember, and I'd forget it. He'd keep up with it, and you know, we get home, we'd try to watch other people and see what they did, and he's always good about, you know, helping me put that into our race cars.
Well, you know, there's one thing about our broadcasting, Barney and I's broadcasting career. I was just starting then, but it seems like the innovation and equipment we had, you know, for broadcasting and stuff was changing as about as fast as that Bush deal did. They went from 358 engines to 311s. That was one big change. And then they go from 311 engines to downsizing the cars shorter to 105-inch wheelbase. And not only that, they switched them to V6s. So y'all went through a lot of different changes, and that had to be nerve-wracking for a driver.
Yeah, the car drove a lot different, you know, and the motors were so much different, you know. To get the V6 to run, you know, it took a lot of work, and we worked day and night trying to get things going. You know, we had some help, but it was a big change. You know, it took us a lot of hours to get caught up on that.
There were an awful lot of the young drivers that had come along at that time, LD, and a lot of them didn't get a chance to go and ride and drive. And actually, they ended up in somebody's shop and put things together there and learn what makes a race car good, what you can do with it, and what you can't do with it. But to have a transition like they did and go through there about 4 or 5 different ones over a ton of years, I tell you, guys worked your butt off, didn't you?
Yeah, you know, we had some good people. There was a kid come to our shop one time going to UT, and he hang around. You know how kids are. And he one day I said, what are you doing? What are you wanting? He said, I want to learn how to work on race cars. And I said, well, we can't pay any more people. I said, we're paying all the people we can afford to. I said, if you'll hang around, and maybe, you know, later on, he said, well, I just want to work on race cars. So he hang around, started doing little things, watching what was going on. And he got to where he could do anything on the race car, and he stayed with us till I quit and retired. And he went to work for Junior Doug Randolph. He's still working today, and he's a crew chief. He's been a crew chief for quite a few teams, and he's on the truck now. And so
actually, you had 2 guys, Jay Smith. You know, he worked on some of those.
Yeah, Jay, he's done great too. He works for Hendrick now, so they both done real well, you know, and they learned a lot at our shop. That's how they got their start.
Yeah, Doug Randolph, actually crew chief for Tyler Reddick right now in the Camping World Truck Series. They're the championship points leader, so he's learned something out of it.
Yeah, Doug was a great person and personality, and he learned a lot. He wanted to learn, and he did a good job at it.
Those guys a lot of times would come over from the other division, the other couple of divisions in NASCAR back in those days, You didn't just they realize, some of the guys you talk to now, how lucky they are when they came into racing. Now they're handed usually a brand new race car. All they got to do is get in and show how much talent you got, rather than it go the other way. But right now, there's a lot of good guys that have wormed their way into Winston Cup and several years ago, and then Sprint Cup nowadays. So being there is, if you got a good car like you talk about, L.D., it's not that bad, is it?
No, it's not that bad. Today those guys just go out and drive those cars, and they're all the guys that works on the cars are engineers. It's just a whole different deal now. The cars are so much different, drive so much better. It's a whole different world right now as far as racing.
Barney, I remember back in the 80s and 90s too. A lot of guys, young guys, we talk about, had a lot of talent, but they didn't have the car, and they wound up with no riding out of the sport. They're gone now, and we're just a memory now. And some of the guys that you take Larry Pearson, I thought he was going to be move on up and be and it just didn't work out for Larry like it did. And he's got the name and everything it took to go with it, and the knowledge too.
Everybody expected him to move up in the business as years went on and technology came around. We talked about several of the guys that ran the different divisions of NASCAR. And LD, we've talked about an awful lot of guys that you have I want to say race and not said a wreck one.
I've done that too.
Now, he did wreck Larry Pearson a few times.
Yeah, we've had some fender benders.
Matter of fact, David came said, "LD, please quit wrecking Larry. He's trying to win a championship."
Yeah, but Larry was a great racer too. We all competitors and try to win every race, and we'd bend fenders once in a while. But just like Jack was, we got to we were friends, but we was great competitors.
Who was your biggest rival out on the racetrack?
Jack Ingram.
That's true.
It didn't take long to answer that one.
No, not really. No, Jack was a great racer, but we had a lot of races together. And Jack was a good racer. He was a smart racer. Jack, he worked on his own car like we did, and he knew what it took to win races. And we learned to do that. And Jack was a great, he was a great racer back in his day.
Let's talk about another driver that was quite a racer back in his time. Also, I haven't mentioned his name tonight, and he's. Over the years, when he was active, he was about as tough as anybody out there, and I'm talking about Tommy Ellis. Any thoughts about you racing him?
Oh, yeah. Tommy and I, we raced together. He was a good racer, but we had a lot of ups and downs over the years. Tommy and I did, and he's hard to get along with. He always was, for me anyhow. But I could tell a lot of tales about Tommy and I. But I'm not going to mention those, but we
when you have the name Terrible Tom, there's something
he was
wrong
Terrible
with that
Tom,
picture.
all right. But he was a good racer. He won races, but we seemed to have a lot of fender benders when we got together, sort of like Jack and Dick Hutcherson. Not Dick Hutcherson, but Sonny Hutchinson.
Yeah. Well, you fall out there in Martinsville against Terrible Tom and Sonny Hutchins, and those guys were up in Virginia. They were rough.
Yeah, they was all rough, but there's some good racers. Ray Hendricks, I always thought he was one of the best race car drivers that I ever raced against. He could go anywhere and win a race, and he didn't look like a racer, but he knowed how to win races.
You ever think about jumping back into it? Maybe do a little of it?
No, we ran the Legends race at Bristol. I've always said, if you've ever learned how to do something like that and do it so long, and it comes back to, I did real well at Bristol. I could have probably won both races if I'd have really tried hard. The first race, I started in the back and ran third and slowed down. And the other race, I led the race. I started on the pole and ran off ahead from them, and I slowed down and waited on them to catch up. I could have probably won both races if I tried, but they want us to mix it up. It wasn't a race like
It was for show.
Before.
It was for entertainment.
It was for show. Entertainment is what it was.
Okay, but tell us, the first year you raced on bisply tires. Then the second year you did it on radials. Could you, as a driver, tell a big difference in the feel of the car?
Oh yeah, that's the only time I ever raced on radial tires, and then the car to start with, it changed so much. The tires were so much different. Anyhow, they wasn't Goodyear or Firestone. There was some brand X, and I never drove them, and I didn't know if it's going to blow out or what, because you could smell them up in the car like it's on fire. They didn't let us practice in the car. Never got into the car until they started to race, and that was sort of a bad deal. So if we'd have got to practice in the car, and get them set up like they should have been.
I think that led to a big
That was
wreck.
bad. Yeah, I tried to get them to do that, but they didn't, so it ended up bad. But anyhow, the tires were, I guess, too soft for the cars. Anyhow, I could just smell the tires like they was on fire. So I slowed down, and I could have won the race if I just kept running, I believe.
Well, there was a lot of other things that have changed with NASCAR type race cars. Let's go back to some of the days you were racing. There's stories about your feet getting burned, about different things you had to do in order to protect yourself inside the race car.
Oh yeah, to start with, we didn't have any insulation at all in the cars. We ran. I know we went to Daytona one time with a new car and running real good. And it got so hot on the floor, I had to come in about 20 laps after the race started, and they had to wrap my feet in towels, and it burned all the paint off the floor, and my feet were blistered. I couldn't hardly walk for a week or two. But back then we really didn't have the time, didn't have the technology, to do it like you do today. But anyhow, it gets so hot, you just. I'd lose. I know 2 or 3 times I've lost 5 or 6 pounds in a race. I'd wait just to see how much I lose in one race. So I don't think I'd do that today.
Well, what was your hardest racetrack for you? What most difficult racetrack to drive for you?
We're Jack up on the river. They call it Asheville. I never did do very well up there. It's a circle, and I'd never run there but for 3 or 4 races. I didn't like that track. I guess because I didn't like it, I didn't do very well at it. But I guess that's about the worst one that I could think of right off.
You were one of the few Bush guys that ever got to race at the Riverside Speedway out in California road course. And then you ran well both times at Road Atlanta. You ran 5th and 2nd at Road Atlanta.
Yeah.
Tell us how that translated from Riverside, California, and you finished second one year, right?
Yeah.
And then you had a 26-second lead, and the track bar broke the second year. How did those 2 racetracks compare?
Well, they were quite a bit different, yet they were road courses. You go left and right. Riverside was a faster racetrack. You ran faster on it, but Road Atlanta was a lot more challenging. I ran real well both racetracks. I enjoyed them because I guess the way we drove around home, those crooked roads and stuff like that. And I always had old cars.
Running what?
Well, I'm not going to mention that. But anyhow, old cars, 4-speed transmission, some of them. We get out on dirt roads and sore butts sometimes and get the city police or the county law after us. We did that quite often, but I learned how to get around those slick roads there, and I enjoyed
Your name has been mentioned.
Oh, well. But anyhow, the road course I just picked up. I love the road course racing.
You always said, Barney, that Riverside, one part of that racetrack, about the fastest part of any racetrack.
Yeah,
that's right.
Had a really, really long straightaway coming out of the S's there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That was one of the fastest places on the course, whether you're running here or Riverside, California, or back at North Wilkesboro. It didn't make any difference. You said the same thing a moment ago, is if you got the equipment, you can win. If you don't, it's going to be awfully hard for anybody to go to victory lane.
The first time I went to Riverside, I couldn't believe how fast the cars ran down that long back straight. They'd run, I'd say, 180 mile an hour. That was quite fast for the day, Mm-hmm. And then you had to turn left and back or right. You had to have super brakes. And I was having trouble. And Cale and Pearson run there all the time, and they was great drivers out there. And Cale helped me, the rev limiter, it'd bump the rev limiter and I'd screw up, And I kept telling him, I said, man, you're going to have to do something. Cale said, get him to turn that thing up, or you some way turn that thing off, and they said, you'll be all right. So I did that, and that really helped me. Then Pearson, he ran there all the time, and I'd get on the radio and listen to him, and I learned a lot there, and I got to where I could really run the road courses.
let's talk a little bit about your career. I mean, you've won championship, you've won track championships, you've won so many different races around so many different parts of this country. And then when you look at the Premier Series, what is the Sprint Cup Series now, 10 starts there. Did you have an interest in going and running full time in the Premier Cup Series, or was that something that just wasn't your thing?
It never was really my thing. I think I could have done pretty well at it if I'd have stayed at it. You know, I went to Bristol and ran second, and we could probably won the race. We made 2 extra pit stops. It was hot that day. Everybody was having a terrible time, and we was changing drivers. Everybody was.
It was a terrible time for even the fans.
Yeah. So it was so hot, and we changed drivers more than Benny Parsons and Johnny Esma won the race, and we ran second. But we outrun them on a racetrack. It's just a matter of that we pitted twice more than they did.
It was known back then, Barney. You remember driver change at Bristol was a big thing in that.
Terrible.
Everybody had somebody standing by.
Yeah, and you had and most time it was a Bush guy or somebody from the sportsman division, because there wasn't that many drivers around.
Yeah. It was a good place to cut your teeth down there. We're talking about Harry Gant a minute ago, and it reminds me of a couple of times. He was probably one of the most unusual drivers we ever had in both divisions of NASCAR at that time. That was before the trucks came along. I did some interviews with him out there a couple of times, and the first time he ever went to Riverside, I interviewed him a little bit, and he didn't want to talk much about it. And what was the guy's name that owned his car? They called him the Preacher Man for something. I can't remember what his name was now. But anyway,
I remember the Preacher.
I remember the name, but I can't remember.
I've seen. I remember him.
Yeah,
but I can't. I can't remember his last name.
But on Harry, let me finish that up real quick. Gant was a great driver in Winston Cup or whatever you want to call it. This
Sportsman, Bush, anything.
And the competition over there on that side in that division of NASCAR was about as tough as it anywhere. I asked Harry after he made his qualifying run and everything the first time out there, and I said, what do you think about Riverside? He said, hell, I can't see half of it when I go around here because of the dust. And he said, and the other deal, I used to tell him that he was the only driver that had ever set a record for pit stops, that he stopped 55 times, and 10 of that was for gas, and the rest of it was for directions on how to get around it. Yeah, but he made it work.
Well, I'll tell you one thing about Harry, and LD witnessed this. One time at Nashville Speedway, Harry Gant drove 700 laps, and then drove the truck home.
Yeah.
Jumped on the road back down.
Yeah, they had a late model sportsman race, and then they had what they call the Marty Robbins 500, which was 500 laps for the ASA type cars, and they had a rain out on the late model sportsman race on Saturday night, so they raced all of it on Sunday. Harry drove 700 laps with about a 30-minute break in between.
That was the same car too, wasn't it?
Yeah, they just took some weight out of it.
Didn't know that.
It drove the same car, took the weight out. They had about 30 minutes or something like that to get ready. He run that car against those Camaros.
LD had 2 different cars, by the way.
Yeah. And he won the race. I couldn't believe that, but he won that race that day. Won both of them.
Well, no, he finished third in the second. But driving, the guy that used to work for Harry worked for us, and I was bragging about him driving the 700 laps, and I started to walk off to go somewhere, and he grabbed me by the shoulder and he said, "Oh, by the way, he drove the truck home too."
Harry was the toughest racer I guess I ever raced against.
And probably the strongest guy I've ever seen.
Yeah, I guarantee you we could put him in a race car right now, and he would perform as good as he did 10 years ago. I really believe that.
I believe that too.
I don't believe you can make Harry mad. I don't think I ever see him get mad hardly in a race car. You know, somebody run over and wreck him, he just get out and.
I've heard that about you, though. I heard that it was difficult to make you angry as well.
Boy, that's you got the wrong.
Well, most of the times, but sometimes I'd get riled up.
I'll tell you this as being a crewman for LD. If someone spun him out, I knew who the next caution was going to be, and that is a fact. He would get paid back.
Well, you always got to pay your debts.
Yeah.
Well, big thanks to L.D Ottinger for stopping by and joining us here on this edition of TaleSpin. As always, huge thanks to our legendary voices of the Motor Racing Network, Jim Chopper Phillips, and, of course, the voice himself, Barney Hall. So until our next edition of TaleSpin, I'm Alex Hayden. Thanks so much for listening.